Hello, my name's Liz Weir. I'm a storyteller and I write books as well. This one's called Boom Chickaboom, and this one's called Here, There and Everywhere. And I'm going to tell you a story from Boom Chickaboom. The story is about a boy. His name is Sam. And Sam loves scary stories. Whenever he went to the library, he always looked for the scariest books. And one day he said to his dad, "Can I go and see my friend Michael after school?" And his dad said, "Yes, you can, but you remember, it gets dark early these days. Make sure you come home before dark because you'll have to walk through the forest." So off he went to Michael's house. Oh, Michael had been in the library and got these brilliant books. And he read one and then another and then another. And then Sam said, "Oh no, it's nearly dark and I have to walk home." So he started to walk home. Can you make his footsteps walking along like me? But all of a sudden he heard a noise behind him. Boom, 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 boom. Can you do that? Let's try. Boom, 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 boom. And he stopped and he looked behind him and he could see a big grey shape. He said, "Who's there?" And the voice said this: "Guess what I can do with my long bony finger and my ruby red lips." Ah! He started running and the noise behind him came boom, boom, boom. And he stopped again and he said, "Look, stop messing around. Who's there?" Can you do the voice? "Guess what I can do with my long bony finger and my ruby red." Ah! And he ran to his own house and behind him he could hear the boom, 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 boom. And he said, "Oh, the door's locked." And he looked behind, he saw that dark shape and he said, "Who's there?" Can you do the voice? "Guess what I can do with my long bony finger and my ruby red lips." He said, "I can't run any further. Who are you? What can you do with your long bony finger and your ruby red lips?" And the big creature just went. Just then the outside light came on and he looked and it was his dad. His dad said, "Sam, didn't I tell you to come home before dark?" He said, "You did, Daddy." He said, "I thought I'd give you a surprise." He said, "You did." So if you want to scare somebody, boys and girls, sneak up behind them. Are you ready? What do you say? "Guess what I can do with my long bony finger and my ruby red lips." What can you do? Can you show me? That's the story. I hope you liked it as much as I do. I have a story this time that doesn't come from Ireland. In fact, we don't get this animal in Ireland. This is an animal you find in America. And I want to see if you can guess what the animal is before the end of the story. You see, a long time ago in the forest in America, there was this animal with long, white, silky fur. Very beautiful looking, and he thought it too. He'd stop and look at himself in ponds and say, "I'm so lovely, I'm so gorgeous, there's nobody like me." The other animals couldn't stand him. But one day, as he was walking through the forest, he felt hungry. And he looked up and he saw a mother owl flying out of her nest. He went, "Happy days." And he climbed up. And in the nest were 3 baby owls. And he lifted one up and said, "Ugh, you are so ugly. I'm too beautiful to eat you. You're ugly." Dropped it down and climbed down the tree. Well, the mother owl came flying back home to her nest with her mouth all full of nice tasty grubs and worms that little owls eat. And this is what she heard. She said, "What's wrong?" "Stop crying, tell Mama what's wrong." An animal came and he said, "We were ugly." She said, "Ugly? My babies?" "No, I don't think so. You're beautiful." "Who said that to you?" An animal with a long white fur." "Right," she said, "I know who you mean. Eat up your grubs and worms. Mummy has to go a message. She'll be back." Well, have you ever seen a really cross mummy? Oh, the mother owl flew out of her nest. She was really angry. She swooped down like a dive bomber, picked up that animal with the white fur and thought, "Right, you." She shook him. And then she saw a place where there'd been an old bonfire. And you know the way all the ashes get all black. And she pulled him through the ashes this way. She turned him over. She pulled him through it this way. And she dropped him in a pond. Shoo. When he came out, he looked quite different. From the tip of his nose, the tip of his tail on this side, his fur was singed black in colour. And from the tip of his nose, the tip of his tail on this side, his fur was singed black in colour. And the only bit of white was a stripe that runs right down the middle of the back. And ever since then, can you guess what that animal's called? No, it's not a badger. We get badgers in Ireland. It's called a skunk. And the thing most people know about a skunk is they stink. And that's the smell of the burnt fur as the skunk went through the fire. That's the story of how the skunk got its smell. I hope you liked it. I'm sure many of you know the story of Noah's Ark, but you might not know this version I'm going to tell you. You see, Noah heard there was going to be a flood. You probably know that bit. You know, he built a big boat called an ark. You know, he put on animals. How many? You're right. 2 of every kind of animal. And everything was going well. Here's where it maybe changes from the story you know. All of a sudden, Noah looked and he said, there's water coming in. Somebody do something. He said, Elephant, you're big. Come over. So Elephant came with his big trunk and he put it over the hole. Pip, 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 pip. No, too salty, Noah. No. Monkey, you come. Monkey sat on it. Oh, he jumped up. It's too cold. I have no fur in my bottom. I can't do that. And then the next thing, ruff, dog came over. Ruff, you want to help, dog? Ruff. So dog went and put his nose in the hole and kept his nose in the whole time the ark was sailing, and everybody got home safely. And you know, Noah turned to dog and he said, Dog, you've saved us. From now on, we're going to call dog man's best friend. But the problem was, dog had had his nose in that hole for so long that it was wet and cold. So that, boys and girls, is why all dogs have had wet, cold noses ever since. I'd like to tell you a story that comes from an island off the coast of County Antrim. It's called Wrathlon Island. And in fact, this is one of my favourite stories. It's about a boy called Jim, who was about 9 when the story happened. He lived on the island and he loved living there because he helped with the sheep and he helped lift eggs, but his favourite job, when it was the time of the year, was to go out and pick plump, juicy blackberries, because he'd always come back with blackberry juice all down his chin. He always wore his oldest clothes, you know, his old jumper with holes in it and his old tattered trousers. It's a long time ago, this. And his mother would always say to him before he went out 2 important things. 1, come home before dark. That's still important. And the other one was, don't go near the fairy tree. Because anybody in Ireland nearly knows that you must not touch a fairy tree. Those old hawthorn trees that stand all by themselves, farmers won't even cut them down. So Jim went away off and his mother made his favourite dinner. And I'm sure you'd try and guess what it was. You might think pizza or spaghetti. None of those things. It was a thing called champ. Mashed potatoes, spring onions chopped up, heated in milk, beaten into the mashed potatoes. Yummy. But Jim didn't come home. His mummy panicked. She went out crying, Jim, Jim, Jim. All the neighbours got their lamps and they went out looking. You know, this was in the olden days, their old hurricane lamps. They could find him nowhere, and it got too dark to search anymore, and his poor mother sat crying because she was scared maybe he'd fallen off a cliff into the sea. She was so sad. All the next day the people searched and searched and searched. But you know, at supper time the next night she heard the door open, she heard footsteps, she looked up, there was her son. Now she didn't know whether to be cross with him or to hug him, but she hugged him anyway. She said, where have you been? And then she said, what happened to you? Because, do you know, he looked quite different. His face was scrubbed and clean. He had, you know, his hair was neatly combed. Even the back of his neck was clean. He had no holes in his jumper. He had no holes in his trousers. She said, what had happened to you? He said, I was coming home late. And I was coming past that old tree that you call the fairy tree. And there was a big bush full of blackberries. And I stopped to pick them. And all of a sudden I felt myself getting nipped and pinched. And I looked down and there was a whole row of little people no bigger than my knee. Fairies. They pulled me down onto the fairy hill. They pushed me in a big tub of soapy water. They scrubbed my face, their hair. They took my clothes and the little fairy tailors stitched them all up. Then Jim's mother remembered a story that the old people used to tell. That if the fairies ever captured a human girl or a human boy, and if inside one day they could clean them of all the muck and grime of our world, every trace of our world, they could keep them forever. But he was home, safe and sound. His mummy put him to bed, said their prayers. But about 8 o'clock he shouted, Mummy! And she ran in. And he was sitting up in bed. He said, my finger's sore. When she looked, deep down under the nail on the middle finger of his right hand was a thorn of a blackberry bush. And those fairies, with all their scrubbing and all their cleaning, they'd missed that little tiny thorn under his nail. So if any of you boys and girls are out playing and you scuff yourself, you get your shoes dirty, you catch your jumper on a branch or something, don't worry about it. That's the thing that makes sure we all come home safe and sound. The fairies will never get us.